And next up, we're going to bring up our keynote panel. We have Building a Seed Commons from an Indigenous Peoples lens here. If you've been in the classroom number 3 all day and yesterday working on the seed work, this is a continuation of that. So we're going to invite up Jim Embry from Sustainable Communities Network and Eleanor Lopez from Native American Indian Association and all the panelists. And I'm going to let Eleanor and Jim introduce all the panelists for you guys. So stick around if you need to go to the bathroom real quick, get a drink. There's hot water for tea, and get comfortable. Thanks.
In the back. Okay, so we have 3 mics that you guys can pass, and I think they're all on. Okay.
Don't sit. Yeah. So don't sit. The mic's on. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Hey, Natalie. Feather's here. Feather's here.
Oh yeah.
Can we get in? So to say, next time you come, I'll take you down all around to Nashville to the Country Music Hall of Fame and go to my favorite honky tonks.
I don't want to be there with them.
Yeah.
We need another chair. Right? Is there
I think we got you and Jim.
We're just going to defer to Feather. The congestion is, the later in the day, it always gets worse. Congestion Usually I don't have too many issues, but it's rifle season at home, and I kind of avoid
Mic on? Okay. Go down, Moses, way down in Egypt land. Tell old Pharaoh, let my people go. Let my people go. That song is just not a spiritual, a message from the Moses Harriet Tubman. It's a message for now. How do we all become Moses and say, let my people go? It's not just the human people that need to be freed from bondage. It's all of our relatives need to be freed from bondage. And how do we, out of this food summit, Seed Commons work, begin to have a vision like Harriet Tubman did, who went back 30 or 40 times, never got caught, to free her people. You said, well, how did Sister Girl never get caught? Partly because she had an intimate relationship with all of her people. She knew how to jump into the water and lose the tracks of the dogs. She knew how to gather medicinal herbs to maybe provide a salve for a skin that's been cut by rocks or thorns of the bushes, or maybe shot. She knew on which side of the tree the moss would grow, which way, and she could read the North Star. Had a sense of spiritual calling for her work. And that's our work today. So we want to spend some time thinking about vision. But I was just struck by the idea of being inclusive and participatory and equity and those things like that. 5 years ago, I was asked by my dear beloved Jeff, the barefoot farmer, I think Natalie and a few other people, to engage 5 years ago with this idea of making this something more inclusive, more engaging, more diverse in a wide variety of ways 5 years ago. My sons here all went to UT. One son lives here in Nashville, one lives in Memphis. My in-laws are from Chattanooga. So even though I'm from Kentucky, I'm also a Tennessee boy. Now, connecting these Follow Awards, I was trying to get the tech crew to show a little short video about what's called the James Beard Awards. That occurred this summer in Chicago. And they're regarded as the Oscars of the food and ag industry. And three people, the brother here, David, we talked earlier about, their role with sponsorship, and we mentioned a variety of things that, they're looking for and things of that nature. And I mentioned, the things that I've been involved in, and the seed work. He mentioned how impressive was the seed work. In the James Beard Award, we had three people out of 6 who won the James Beard Awards. Our dear sister, they call her Mama Ira Wallace. I call her Nefer Ira Titi. Rowan White, Indigenous seed keeper. And old boy, crazy-ass Jim Embry from Richmond, Kentucky. isn't there a connection between the Fowler Awards and the James Beard Awards? The brother just said how impressed he was with the seed work. He talked to Chris about the USDA germplasm and trying to get a handle on all the things that are out there. I had a simple request. Just play some of the stuff. These things aren't disconnected. Why wouldn't you want to mention something about a native son of Kentucky, of Tennessee? Because part of it is, these folks here, I said, I can help you understand how to get your butt a James Beard Award, okay? Let's have a conversation about that. How do you take the Fowler Awards and things going on? And how can we develop, the kind of capacity, the kind of thinking about, well, because two from Kentucky won the awards, okay? Myself, Valerie Horn up in Whitesburg from Appalachia. That don't mean something? Anyway, I'm just trying to make these connections. Quilting, requilting this fabric, trust, integrity, authenticity. And how if you invite folk like me in to be a part of the planning, and I just make a simple request, okay, well, that's he's an OG, he's crazy. We know he's crazy, but that's, anyway. In closing out this evening, we've asked our dear beloved folks who've been with us all day. We've been dragging their asses around, all day long. They've been so willing. You come to a conference, generally, you do a 2-hour workshop and you go home. Okay? Generally, that's what you do. 2 hours and you go home. We said, no, this is not quite that. This is like more of a organizational building, capacity building around seed commons, and we need you to be on point presenting about different levels of your work throughout the day. And we thank you all for being here all day. Chris and I are going to Memphis on the 6th, right? Yeah, it's called to Memphis in a couple of days. It's called Ag Lunch. Now, Chris, you think I lie a lot, but Chris don't lie. And part of the conceptualization is about the Mississippi River Delta. And he'll tell you, we've been asked to be there, was it 9:30 a.m. till at night, all day. All day, this visioning and exploration of what it means, sustainable future and ag and all that. Because this work requires a lot of intentionality, a lot of time to figure the stuff out. You just can't come in there for an hour and figure it out. So we'll be up in there. But anyway, so we asked the panel to think about these larger dimensions of vision. It could be vision on your farm. It could be vision for seed commons as a structure. Could be the food summit. It could be even larger national, global visions. You can just take your pick. Now, we've got a sister here. Let her speak first as we're opening it up. I won't say that she's like, a former beauty queen and Miss Cherokee, but she's all that. But she is here from the Cherokee Nation of Oklahoma, representing the principal chief, Chuck Hoskins, and representing also the sister who is the Secretary of Natural Resources from the Cherokee Nation. She is a national government representative. We all understand that. Oftentimes you're talking between nations, not just between organizations. So I hope we can express our gratitude, our appreciation that the chief thought enough about us in terms of trust, relationship building, to send a designee here, less this weekend. So, as we begin this sense of paneling, and you all being involved as well, let's welcome again Feather Smith, ethnobotanist, Cherokee Nation, to speak to us. Thank you, love.
Well done. Good evening, everybody. I don't know how many of you got to hear the keynote and some of the panel this afternoon, but since we were kind of asked to think about what we kind of want to see visioning-wise, I'll kind of try to start out, I'll kind of try to start out with talking about what we want to see on a small scale with our program, and then kind of how that builds over time. So I kind of explained this earlier in the keynote, and that when we started this program, it was done entirely backwards and was never with the intent of what it had turned into. It just started as a means of finding Cherokee seeds and then making sure that the genetics of those seeds were saved. Out of the excess of that, then we were able to give back to citizens, get their seeds into their hands. But we're still a very small program. Cherokee Nation is by itself the largest tribe in the United States, if we're just talking membership. And then we recognize all three federally recognized bands of Cherokee, which also includes the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians and the United Ketua Band of Cherokee Indians. And so at the end of the day, we're talking about well over 400,000, 500,000 people that we're trying to provide seeds to, and we can only produce around 8,000 to 10,000 packages of seed each year. Our program just continues to grow as it's gone online, as the word has gotten out there, the popularity has grown. We went from when the program started just being able, almost having to call and just practically beg people to take the seeds, the excess seeds off of our hands. We would hold on to them for a couple of months, and we were just calling whoever we could think of, trying to get them to take seeds. And now, as soon as our program opens up online, I'm usually out within a weekend, and I have people calling me the following week going, am I too late? And it's just one of the things that I always hate to have to tell a citizen especially, but anybody, I'm sorry that we can't get seeds to you because we are completely out. It's exciting to see how that program has grown, but it's also frustrating not to be able to keep up with the demand. So obviously we want to grow. We only have a 2 to 3 acre site. One of the things that the current administration, Chuck Hoskin Jr. and his cabinet is wanting to do is actually build a garden that's just about a mile down the road, so it would still be very, very close to our current garden, but far enough away that we'll be able to grow without having to worry about cross-pollination issues. And so he's wanting to actually grow this, and it's going to be a Wilma Mankiller garden, so it'll be named after the first female principal chief that we had. And it's the vision of that is to actually have a space where people have an outdoor walking path, a trail, parks and playgrounds that are culturally inspired and based. And then we want to have a Cherokee botanical garden on that site that is taking notes from the garden that we already have there and expanding on that, and then also hopefully having a much larger area to grow some of those heirloom crops. Because currently, of course, if we're growing something like corn and beans, we can only grow one of each of those varieties on our site. And so to be able to grow more than one variety in a year, we have to find another site. All of the years that this has been going on, Pat Gwynn, the man I mentioned earlier and my predecessor, he actually, and is still even this year, growing for us at his personal property. But we want for the program to become completely independent of any one individual. So we don't want it to be dependent on Pat Gwynn, and we don't want it to be dependent on me. We want it to be able to stand alone if something should happen to one of us. So we're hoping that with that garden we can see that, but then we also want to see potentially about getting another third site so we can start getting all of our heirloom crops growing each year. We'll hopefully be able to expand the amount that we're growing and then get more back to the citizens. And as we're able to do that, and the hope is that as our citizens get a hold of these seeds, that they kind of start building their own little seed banks in their home and within their communities and their families, that may start taking some of the demand off of just our citizenship, and maybe at one point we'll be able to even offer it a little bit more broadly, because we get a lot of requests on people wanting to get a hold of these seeds, and it's just such a small program. Of course, it's all a government-based program. We are a tribal government. We run like a government, so we have funding issues and we have restrictions and things that we have to use as well. But that's what our really ultimate goal is to make this bigger, make this program more independent of any one person. We have a very small staff, so as staff grows and knowledge grows with that staff, it's going to become more embedded, and has already become an important program. And with all of that, the main underlying idea here is that as people get their hands in the dirt and they get their hands on these seeds, you naturally start becoming more in tune with your environment and the nature around you. As you start to gain an understanding of these plants and nature and how it works, you naturally become a steward of the land, and you want to take care of the land. It's always sort of confusing for people, because it would seem like when we talk about something a little bit unrelated and a little bit related, when we talk about things like hunting, people already kind of automatically assume that most hunters have a tendency of wanting to over-harvest. And we definitely have problems with poachers and things like that. But a vast majority of hunters are actually wanting to preserve and try to help the populations of animals. They oftentimes become some of your biggest stewards about wanting to see those game regulations in place. And so they understand that concept, and we've kind of gotten away from that concept when it comes to the land and it comes to plants and it comes to seeds. Even though we know our food, all too often we think of food as coming from grocery stores. So once we can get those people, those seeds back into their hands, and they get their hands in the dirt, you naturally become a steward of the land. And as you become that steward of the land, you become more aware of your surroundings, how to take care of that, wanting to branch out, wanting to share those with others. You create a whole community that just wasn't there before. So that's the ultimate goal for us.
Beautiful. Thank you. Now, we've had these sessions all day long, and we outlined, who to speak in what order. And for all kind of reasons, I've had Brother Chris go almost last every time, because part of my thinking is that men have had to speak so often. That's that women go first. But now I want to go to my dear beloved Brother Chris to share a few things.
Thank you, Jim. Hey everyone, my name's Chris Smith. I run a small nonprofit called the Utopian Seed Project out of Western North Carolina. And in thinking about seed and visioning, then I think what I want to briefly share is, first of all, just to get us all on the same page, most seed that is produced in the United States is not produced in the Southeast. Most of it comes from Pacific Northwest, a little bit West Coast, some in the Northeast. But as farmers growing in the Southeast and the seed that we have access to, most of that is not grown regionally. There's also international import of seeds. So the premise that I'm going to just run with, whether you agree with it or not, is seeds that are grown and saved in a place will adapt over time and become better suited for that place. And as farmers growing in the Southeast that don't have access to those regionally adapted resources, then we're kind of on a back foot and are growing in challenging conditions in terms of pests and diseases and humidity and other specific Southeastern challenges. And so when I look at the greater seed system as a whole, I see that as a fundamental challenge that we face in terms of a Southeastern food system challenge. There is no regional seed production of any merit. So working on that as a premise, then for a good number of years, myself and plenty of other people have been thinking, how do we get more seed growers in the Southeast? And that's the vision I'm going for here, is like more seed growers in the Southeast. And there's so many different barriers that get thrown up, and we don't have time to dig into all of them in this short panel discussion. We've been teasing them out throughout the day. But one thing we recognized, we did a summit in 2019, which was kind of a visioning summit around Southeast seed systems. And one of the challenges we came up against was there was a lack of network. There were lots of people that were kind of interested in seed or even doing seed work, but they weren't connected, so we didn't have community. There were legitimate climate and economic barriers to growing seed, because it's harder to grow seed in the Southeast, and that was a big challenge. And then there was some like access to resources and equipment and other things. And so part of that summit, the vision or the work that came out of that visioning session was like, we need a Southeast seed network. And for a little while, that was the vision. We were like, how do we get a Southeast seed network? And the whole initiative just kind of sputtered and didn't go anywhere. And so maybe this is kind of like a warning story. Like I spent a lot of time thinking about big systems level change and how do we get there. And I'm very committed to long-term, high-level visioning. But what I found in my own personal work was that we didn't have the resources or the capacity to get to a Southeast seed network. I still think we need one, but we couldn't get there from where we were starting from. And so just last year, we kind of completely retracted back to Western North Carolina, and we were like, well, what if we just got like 10 farmers together in our region, and we started having pizza parties every month and started chatting to each other, and then we get this small, just $20,000 grant to buy some seed saving equipment that we can all share. And like very quickly, with very limited resources, we were checking off all of those boxes. We had community, we had internal information sharing, small grant gave us access to equipment, and now as an emerging collective, we are negotiating with seed companies as a collective voice to get better contract pricing and say, you need to pay, if you value Southeastern grown seed like you say you do, you need to pay us more money because this is hard work and we're stewarding these varieties. So we're only a year into this. It's very emerging. We've got lots of kind of progressive ideas in this in terms of, we had a big values discussion about what our shared values are so that we could move forward, kind of like progress at the speed of trust type of concept. And out of it, we have all these discussions around the commodification of seeds and deeper thinking about seed ethics. And within our collective, we've decided that we can start decommodifying seeds internally. So now the collective has decided that within the members of the collective, we're gonna share seeds on a much smaller scale than the Cherokee Nation, but people are growing seeds and sharing seeds within their community. And we can do that without cost to ourselves and then sell seeds externally to raise money to cover the cost of the stuff we're doing. But even in the selling of those seeds, we've decided not to attach a monetary value to the seeds themselves, but rather to communicate that we want recompense for access to land, labor, and intellectual skills of stewarding these varieties over time, but the seed itself can continue to be freely gifted. And so we're playing around with like progressive ideas, and these ideas aren't new, and they all were discussed in the Seed Summit for the Southeast Seed Network. It's just that we were trying to bite off more than we could chew, and coming back and being local and intentional has felt really powerful to us. So yeah, my conclusion is like smaller visions that are achievable might be a better option while we take these baby steps to get to the bigger vision that is necessary. I don't know if that's a good message or a bad message, but that's where I've landed.
Excellent. Let's go next to Megan, then we'll come back to Susana, and then Eleanor and I will say if you invite the people out here to comment.
Okay, just to briefly introduce myself, my name is Megan Allen. My husband and I farm care of the Earth Community Farm, which is just northeast of Knoxville, Tennessee. I'm gonna piggyback a little bit off of Chris. For those of you who weren't here earlier, I think where I am in my farming career, my main goal in terms of seeds is creating some sort of regional seed supply that is seeds that are adapted to a region, whatever that region is defined as, and that make it more feasible for farmers to survive and thrive in our region. And I don't quite have the jumping step from where the system that I currently work in to, let's say the seed commons, how we make that jump. But I do think it involves some sort of secondary step, like Chris is talking about, with forming some sort of collective that then can sort of do some of the education work, do some of the seed savings, seed infrastructure work that is so difficult for seed farmers to do as an individual, and then also kind of do this pushback work against some of the seed companies. Chris and I were talking about at dinner, I think this idea of having someday some sort of collective of collectives that is the Southeast seed supply, I think is sort of my dream, but I don't quite have the concrete steps of how to get there yet. And I think, I'm not gonna say a whole lot more, but I think my words from a farmer's perspective would be for the seed commons as we move forward is really listen to seed farmers and what they need and what their struggles are, and sort of, and because I think if we're going to have a regional seed supply, even if I do think gardeners are a big part of that and other, types of growers, but to have a large enough seed supply, seed farmers need to be involved. So that's, I think, what I'll.
Hello. I know that some of you are in our sessions today, but I'm Susana from Salamander Springs Farm near Berea, Kentucky. And my focus, for those of you who weren't with us today, has really been about education. And we discussed a lot the landrace model versus the scales of seed that we look at, and we need all. But I see a lot of people who are afraid to save seeds without the knowledge, and we do need even those small-scale seed producers to feel, especially as I spoke today on the ones that I started with, which I'm going to repeat are mostly seeds that were stewarded for thousands of years by indigenous people on this continent or in Africa, and for good reasons. Those are ones that are friendly to those of us who want to sustain our seed supply in that philosophy of reciprocity that we have lost in this country. We are, as Megan put it in her presentation today, we've just been so cut off from we're disconnected in a really severe way right now. And I said today it's not rocket science. There's a lot that intimidated even, that still does me. I'm trying to move into other seeds that are harder, that have been huge crops for me, like onions and carrots on the market. And I didn't speak of those today. There's things that I would love to do. And I know that we also can sustain ourselves with these, not just the corn, beans, and squash and the okra and all the things that I consider staples, but they're important. And I think that the seed commons and the seed hubs idea needs to include all scales. And when I talk about landrace, there's many definitions. I know that we have different ones, but I don't feel I'm, I don't know what the word you use, Chris. I don't feel like I'm being, what did you say? It was to say that you that you work with land-raised seeds. I feel like that we need to continue that philosophy, and maybe it's my philosophy of what is a land-raised seed, but I'm forgetting what you said. I'm so tired tonight. I'm not making sense. But I feel like we can, as people, continue that process of developing what is not what you buy in the store or what you buy from most catalogs, which they've alluded to is a very uniform product, whether it's a hybrid or a highly inbred heirloom. It is something that is under the philosophy of manipulation and control. I should say control more than manipulation. That's probably a strong word. Versus living seed that adapts to the changing climate, seed that isn't always uniform, but every year you rogue and make decisions with that seed, and it improves in nutritional value and its resistance to pests, or if you're like me, the colors and what it decides to do, the beautiful crosses with the okra. That's what I think we need to take ourselves back to, that piece of creation that we have disconnected ourselves from. Did you say egotistical? To say you did a letter? I don't remember what you said, but.
Okay, what we're going to do next. Now, Sister Eleanor and I have been kind of co-moderating throughout the day. We played that role primarily. But now what we're going to do, I'm going to allow Eleanor to kind of go next and have us each respond to this question of visioning. And then we want to invite folks who are sitting here. I'll bring the mic out and you can share some of your thoughts of these ideas of vision. Okay? So, Sister Eleanor.
Yeah, so grateful for everything that our panel shared with us today. And I think my hope for the vision of a commons in the region is to further the goals of the nations of the southern tribes. So if there's anything, Feather, you think that a group like this, once fully formed, could do to support your program, that's something I would love to see how we can make it happen. Just very, very grateful for having this kind of work and knowledge be told as stories, really capturing the whole stories of the seeds and sharing all of those cultural, ancestral messages from the seeds, maybe incorporating language into that too, the language of the tribes, the language of our African plants that we grow, plants from our migrants from Asia, from everywhere. And finally, the different scales, I think, is what I've heard a lot today, wanting to make this work really accessible to the backyard, to a more large-scale endeavor. So very grateful for all of that that's been offered today.
Wonderful. Thank you. I'm going to share a few thoughts about vision. Again, I was invited 5 years ago to have some input into the local food summit, and I began talking about the idea of vision and how important it was in the conversation. Because by and large, we're not taught culturally to think vision's important. So we're not taught in K through 12, K through 16, to begin thinking about 5, 10, 20, 30-year sense of vision. I'm going to go back to a book written by a dear friend of ours, a friend of mine from Kentucky named Wendell Berry. He wrote a signature book in '74 called The Unsouthering of America. If you get that book and you go to the very end of it, he talks about vision. He lays out 10 points. And one of them was for a 50-year farm bill, not a 5-year. He and West Jackson talked about a 50-year farm bill. In the 70s, after the devastation around World War II and the dropping of the bombs in Japan, the Japanese automakers kind of reemerged with the help of a guy named Deming to think about a different way of manufacturing. But don't trust me, I'll lie a lot. Look at what the vision was for Toyota in the 70s. Their vision was to become number one in the world for auto manufacturing. Who's number one now? Toyota. That was their vision in the 70s. Another example, if you go online, again, I lie a lot, and look up what's called the World Economic Forum. They're guided by what's called the McKinsey Company, and I get their weekly newsletters. I don't know what they're thinking about. McKinsey Company is the facilitator for the World Economic Forum. And look up the forum and look up their vision. They have a 25 and a 50-year vision for the world about food and ag. And they have 5-year increments of how they want to achieve those visions. Okay? That's what they're doing. I'm encouraging us, my friend Wendell Berry, okay, like we're saying here, has decided to kind of devote himself he's in his, like me, as an elder, to Henry County, Kentucky, and making daggone sure that this kind of people know each other as it was years ago. They're providing, all these infrastructure that they need in Henry County. That's what he's doing right now. That's important work. Do we have to rebuild the local commons, rebuild local community networks? Yes, we must do that. But out of the period of the what Du Bois called the Black Reconstruction, there arose a black women's agency called the National Association of Colored Women's Clubs. What was their theme? Lifting as we climb. Lifting as we climb. Which means we have to create the kind of commons where, yes, we're working very intentionally, locally with infrastructure, reknitting, building quilts, I call it, while also building regional structures, national structures, and being linked up with internationally. That's the work. Now we've got to figure out how to do that. And there are also already things in place that we can use as guidelines and guideposts, whether it's the international slow food operations, or whether it's some friends in Louisville have the World Food Sovereignty, or maybe it's the global rights of nature movement people are using to create new jurisprudence. My point is that if I ask you all in your organization, what's your vision? What's your 5-year vision? What's your 20-year vision? Oftentimes we would, we probably couldn't produce that document. I'm just encouraging it's important. Even though we haven't been taught to do that, either individually or collectively. Again, Wendell Berry wrote about it in 1974. Anyway, so we'd like to engage and invite other folk to begin to share ideas about this sense of vision, whether it's within your organization, within your larger. I think we need some larger dimensions of what I was sharing at lunchtime. Part of the vision that I would have about local food summit that we include breastfeeding. What better local food is there than breast milk? But it's hardly ever part of the conversation at a local food summit. How local can you get than breastfeeding? But we've oftentimes adopted that white male patriarchal sensibility about what food is, and we've left out the most basic, the most bonding, where you provide love and caring and guidance. Left it out entirely. It's part of my vision. Anyway, other thoughts on Now, Brother David here, he said he's got a big pot of money. So he told me here earlier. He said, man, I got a big pot of money. This seed thing is inspiring to me. If y'all want to create these national ambassadors to go around the country and talk about, do the Jessup wagon that Carver did, we got money for that. If y'all want to link up, internationally, okay, we got money for. Anybody who said it? I'm just teasing. Got a question? Comment?
So I'm Laurie White with Community Farm Alliance in Kentucky. Something that Megan was talking about got me to thinking about what a benefit this regionally adapted seed bank could be for beginning farmers. Like, I just am thinking about all of those struggles that you mentioned in the South with the disease pressures, the insect pressures, the humidity, the increasing periods of dryness and wetness. Like, all of those things a beginning farmer also faces on top of the challenges of like trying to figure out what they're doing. And if we could get them started with varieties that are adapted to our region, that don't have those same vulnerabilities, like what a boost that would be to our beginning farmers. So just a thought I had.
I want to respond to that.
I mean, I think that's a very big reason as to why I do this. Like, I've been through the 15 years of struggle that no one should have to go through. And I don't want other people to go through that struggle, and that's why I think I'm so willing to share anything that I have learned or that has been taught to me by others, because I had a lot of teachers, but none of them were in the Southeast. So, that was all the stuff I had to learn on my own. So yeah, I very much agree with you.
Thank you for being here all day today. Everybody's been alluding to this, but I want to actually mention it. I want to state it. That visions are great, but if we don't have the power to execute them, we won't get there. So in my perspective, the proper vehicle for the change that we want to see it's a social movement. So we have to learn from social movements of the past and the present. And a couple major points there is the raising of collective consciousness. It's getting people to believe in the same things, so that the kind of change we're looking for does not fit into neoliberal ideology. So I think that we're all positioned to do that, but we don't talk in terms of social movements or social movement theory. The other idea is that we have to create coalitions with like-minded organizations, and there are plenty of them around us, including the local food movement itself. If we can't coalesce with them, then we should figure out how to. I think there's all sorts of organizations that are like-minded, but I think if we begin thinking like a social movement, I think things will start to happen.
Comments on that? I would just go ahead.
I will say, I mean, that's really kind of a great idea. That's how we get people kind of more involved and get these things pushed forward. It's getting more people involved and community. Fortunately, it's something that we're really starting to see a push for today. I've only been doing this for 8-9 years, but I can tell you that in the time I've been here, getting to see people become more and more excited about this, and oftentimes the encouragement to do that is when they get to see others doing it, and that they have people around their region that they can turn to and ask questions of. that really helps, which is why this vision is great, of being able to have growers for the region who can then help out the other growers in the region. And once people know they have a community to rely on, they're naturally more inclined to want to try it, or otherwise it may seem a little bit overwhelming. So it really is a social movement, but fortunately it seems like there are a lot of people who are really ready to move forward in that area.
Yeah. And in that point about social movements, I mean, it draws some historical precedents to learn from. After the Civil War, there were 4 million people who were formerly enslaved that were emancipated. A bunch of them were my relatives, your relatives, whoever else. 4 million who had some vision. At times we forget that as important learning lessons. My great-grandmother, her husband died in the Civil War. He fought in the war and died in the war. She had 6 kids. Single mom. Because she survived, I'm here. She had a vision. Here's a woman who we regard as being illiterate. Can't read and write, signed with an X. But her vision was, we got to survive. Talk about conditions we're faced with. Her husband fought in the Civil War. You better know she was attacked by the KKK in Kentucky, threatened with lynching. But she understood how to deal with those situations. 6 kids. One, her youngest son, my great-grandfather, went to what's called Berea College in 1879. Eventually, all of them owned property. We say we bought land from those who stole the land. How did a dumb-ass black woman by all measures inspire her children to go to college, come together and put pennies down to help buy property collectively? They didn't just do that. Across my farm is a church they helped build after the vision. Down the school was a school. They had business, blacksmith. They were doulas. They were midwives. I'm just trying to share that there are some important lessons from our own history, not just this particular history. But if you're not ingrained in that love of this history that we have produced here, if you're not closely connected, inspired by, understand, and their reach wasn't just in the Southeast. There were 2 million black farmers across the Southeast. They were sending people to the Caribbean. They were connected with things internationally back in the 1890s. Am I right? Am I just making shit up? You know I'm not. I'm just saying that part of the inspiration for the challenges today, part of the inspiration comes from stories like that we get to share, we get to tell, we get to be very engrossed in. Okay? When, as you described so well, were removed, shipped way out of the Southeast to these far distant lands, and said, well, Jackson said we're going to ship you butts out there. We done killed already 9% of y'all. Y'all ain't going to survive. You're still here. Okay. So some vision. I'm just saying that's gird up. That's put whatever armor we need on. That's pull the plow. Come on, let's pull the plow. because there were folks who were dealing with stuff, I don't say it's any worse or better, but they were quite challenging. But we came on through. And that kind of spirit, I think we need to. Again, I mentioned before that the black women, their theme was lifting as we climb. Lifting as we climb. We got to construct the step and then raise ourselves up as we're building the damn step. I mean, that's the work. Anyway, other questions?
Thank you. My name is Melanie. I work at Crabtree Farms of Chattanooga. We're a nonprofit urban farm, and the land we're on is steeped in agricultural history. It's land taken from the Cherokee Nation and then turned into the largest slave-owning plantation in Hamilton County. And so it has an interesting history, and for 25 years, the nonprofit has stewarded this remaining 22 acres that's in a food apartheid neighborhood in Chattanooga. And so what I really wanted to say is, well, the sharing of seeds is very inspiring, and I hope that our farm can get involved in that on some level as the common grows. But also, there's like just this thing in my heart that keeps saying that I hear Feathers talking about growing the Cherokee traditional seeds in Oklahoma, and something in my heart keeps saying that those seeds aren't, they need to come home as well. And because I hear about the inputs and the different strategies, and I'm not a farmer, by the way. I'm nonprofit leadership mostly. Learned a lot on the farm in the last 5 years, but so excuse the ignorance around actual how seeds work. But something just keeps saying that there's a way for the traditional seeds to do well back in their original space of the Southeast. And so I just want to put it out there that I wouldn't say that Crabtree would be skilled to grow your seeds for you necessarily, but if there's ways to partner with the Cherokee Nation or the Eastern Band, which would be closer to Chattanooga, that we would be willing to explore how we could support the addition of growing those seeds back in the Southeast of the United States.
Thank you. Fortunately, that is something. The Eastern Band, most of our seed stock came from working with the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians. So a lot of it did come even from the Southeast, which is why we had so many challenges once we started growing in Oklahoma. And that's always kind of the hope. That's part of why we made sure the Eastern Band and the Katuas were included when we started giving out seeds. For that reason, to make sure that they kind of go everywhere, but we definitely wanted them growing here because this is where the seeds were cultivated, and this was the area they were cultivated for.
Okay. Anyone else? We're going to close out here in just a few minutes. Anything else I want to share? Yes, sir. From my sons here now. Yeah, you got here are twins, okay? I want you to know. And they were born 6 weeks early. They were in the ICU for about 6 weeks, had a cesarean, boom, 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 boom. And we went to the doctors, as they were going to the doctor's care, about a year and a half old. They said, because of 6 weeks early, they're under 4 pounds, whatever. On the growth chart, they said, we're trying to give you a warning. Your kids are all under the growth chart, and you're going to have small kids. That's what they said. That's what they said, okay, when they were about a year and a half old. But the mama kept lugging them big breasts up in them, okay, that breast milk, okay, am I right? She had one over here, one over here. Look at them now. The point is that doctors know so much, and we need to have knowledge ourselves to say, y'all think that way, but hey, we know a little different. These are my sons too. Love them so much.
Thank you, everyone. My name is Aruka Ajane, and 3 things I want to say. Number 1, we need to stop playing small. Marion Williamson, I think, said it best. We are God. We are infinite, but we think that we're the dot on a pen. We are not. The WF does what they do because the leaders of that group and other groups like that, they know that they have the power over us. because they have dumbed us down worldwide for many years. And because of that, they've taught us that we're limited. We're not limited, we're unlimited. We have unlimited potential. And for us to carry forth a larger vision, we must recognize that again, that we have unlimited potential as individuals and collectively. Collectively, I mean the collective human consciousness that all of us in that field, and so all of us participate in that. That's on one level, energetic level. And then two, in terms of seeds, all life basically comes from, at least what we call biological life, starts from what Antoine Béchamp in France at the same time as Louis Pasteur called microzymas, aka tiny ferments. He found these microzymas in limestone rocks that were 3 million plus years old. They were still moving and motile. He figured out that these microzymas, they create every cell, every tissue, every bacterium, every fungi, all life, the fermentation. In terms of them too, what's important for agriculture is that they rely on certain parameters in terms of temperature, in terms of the pressure, and the environment that they're in determines what they become, whether they become unhealthy in terms of moving in from a cell into a bacterium or to a fungi and then back again once the environment becomes healthy again for them. And so with plants, in terms of being grown in the soil, when you have the plants having the right amount of nutrition, both the minerals that are inorganic, without carbon, and the organic matter, and all the different microbes in the soil, of course, itself coming from the rocks anyway, from rock people, that creates healthy plants. And healthy plants, whether it be Dr. Carver, Hugh Lovell, Dr. Hensel, they have the resistance to what we call pests, weeds, or whatever, because basically unhealthy plants send out a signal, an infrared signal in the infrared spectrum, telling the insects, I'm unhealthy, come and eat me. We ourselves as people, all life forms or whatever, we find it easier to eat things, whatever life we want to eat that's weaker than us. We don't want to, insect doesn't want to say, this plant I can't get in the cell wall, whatever, eat it. It'd rather have a plant that's already dying to eat, to munch on. So the key is to create healthy plants by creating healthy soil. In my opinion, too, also by having healthy water. And that really comes back to the environment. And that really goes back to love. Love as the energy, and also love as that's what everything is. And then the third thing is that, we have to, with the food system, look at it in many different levels. Like in 2019, I think it was back then, I was the panelist, moderator, and also on a panel for decentralizing the food system. In that conversation, I broke down the food system globally from A to Z, from top to bottom, up all levels. Because I look at systems as an environmental engineer in terms of in the air, in the water, and the land, as well as to buildings, transportation systems, water systems, the public infrastructure, whatnot. But what we have to stand our vision of the food system as part of the vision as well, though, and understanding all aspects of that so that we understand everyone is part of the food system. My father says we all eat. something, we drink something, so we're always a part of the food system whether we think we are or not, though. So the question is, how do we, in terms of building the movement or whatever, get others to understand their roles that they play in the food system? Because more than one role. And that goes back to 2 plants. Every plant has more than one function or role. We've limited them to one function or one role. And that's not the case. And so, even for ourselves, though, we have more than one function or one role. So our father liked to say that inside our internal body or whatever, we have part 1,000 plus biochemical reactions going on every second. Many different systems exist in our body, in our single body. So we play more than one role. And so that has to be, I guess our calling or whatever is to wake us up the fact that we have more potential than we think we have. Another thing I would say too, the last thing I would say is we live in a world, a universe of abundance, because the abundance is love. That's energy, that's food, that's money. Everything's abundant, but we've been taught and programmed to think in scarcity. And that's part of that little me. Oh, I can't do anything. I'm little me. No. When we think of infinite states or whatever, you see that you're bigger than what you think you are. And by standing up and understanding that we have this potential that will raise up the collective human consciousness so that all of us can see that there's more to us than we think. Thank you.
Can y'all tell, he's my son, okay? Can y'all tell that? What we're going to do, since we had the dear sister, Feather, who's come all the way from Oklahoma, that kind of began, we're going to close out and we're going to just ask her to share a word. But I want to, before she does that, I want to talk about George Washington Carver. One of his famous quotes is, "With no vision, there's no hope." It was one of his visions. It was one of his statements, okay? With no vision, there's no hope. But here's a guy who was born by all measures in the worst condition you could ever have as a child. His dad was killed in a farming accident before he was born. He and his mom were captured by night riders, and his mom sold somewhere in Kentucky. He was 4 or 5 weeks old. The guy who owned them, the Carver family, sent people after his mom and Carver. Couldn't get his mom back, but he brought Carver back a few weeks old, suffering from some kind of respiratory problem. He was raised by the people who enslaved him. That's how he began. His school, however, we would call nature. His school was the forest. His school was the garden. They were his playmates. That's where he learned how to be a person, how to be in connection. So he was born, if you want to call it, 10 feet in the ground. No parents. But then he had a vision, part of his calling, to become what Einstein called one of the greatest scientists of his era. So I'm saying that we can cite many examples, individually, collectively, of folks who have done the honored work of being divine lights, and part of divine light, as we all are, is to have vision. So, dear beloved, Feather, would you just honor us with some final words, and we'll get up out of here.
Well, I'd like to first off state thank you for having me today. I flew out from Oklahoma yesterday. I'll be flying back tomorrow. So I just came here for the summit, and we were really excited to be here. Like I said, Christina was really disappointed that she wasn't able to make it, but we were honored to be invited. And I think I'll try to make this very brief, but really it kind of goes back to a lot of the quotes that I've already said. And as Pat Gwynn often says, the Cherokee people are nothing without Cherokee plants, and without our Cherokee plants, there are no Cherokee people. And that just ties back so much to everything else. As a people, we are so reliant on our environment, and all too often people forget that. But in groups like this, where we're working with seeds, we're thinking about how to move forward with those seed coalitions. How are we going to expand these programs in the future? How can we get these seeds into other people's hands? You know, I've never found stingy seed savers. You'll find people that are very stingy in a lot of other places, but seed savers are all too often just not stingy. It brings the community together, it brings family, and it just brings us more in tune to what we should go back to understanding, those building blocks, which is nature and taking care of nature, and in turn, she will take care of us. And it is truly a way of building community. I got to talk to a young lady earlier today, and she was talking about how excited she was to have gotten to start a job in agriculture, and how gardening has made her, helped her to build a family and a community in an area that she didn't come from, where she doesn't have family, that she has this whole family and community now, all based on gardening. And that on top of being gardeners, her community is all also artists of some sort. Many of them, of course, are musicians, but some of that was other forms of art as well, and that they come together in their gardening circles and use that as a creative means to inspire their artwork. And it's kind of funny because I myself do basket weaving and beadwork and all kinds of things of the traditional sense, and that's where I pull my biggest inspiration, is from my surroundings and the job that I do. And when I'm out there with my hands in the dirt, I'm thinking about different designs and stuff. It just inspires in a way. So groups like this, summits like this, all are just really exciting because it brings us back to those building blocks. So I was so honored to have been here. In Cherokee, we do not have a word for goodbye because we don't believe in final goodbyes. We say, until we meet again. So, donado kohai.